This apple weighs about 6 ounces. It is red on one side and pale gold on the other, with a small brown scuff near the stem where a branch rubbed against it all summer. I picked it this morning. September, early light, the grass still damp. I stood under the tree and counted. 22. Not 100. Not a prize-winning haul. 22 apples from a tree that, 3 years ago, was a bare stick in a plastic bag. I bought that stick for $18 from a nursery 2 towns over. The woman at the register looked at it, looked at me, and said, "Give it 3 years." I nodded like I understood what that meant. I did not understand what that meant. So, here is the roadmap I wish someone had handed me that afternoon. Not the one on the nursery tag, which said, "Plant in well-drained soil, water regularly, enjoy fruit." That tag skipped about 30 months of confusion, doubt, and one genuinely humiliating conversation with my neighbor. This is the year-by-year version. What actually happens, what to do about it, and what to stop worrying about. Year 1. I planted the apple tree on a Saturday in late March. The soil was cold, not frozen, but heavy, the kind that sticks to the shovel in thick slabs. I dug a hole twice the width of the root ball, backfilled with the same soil I took out, spread a ring of wood chip mulch about 3 inches thick, and watered it slowly until the ground stopped drinking. Then I waited. April passed. May came. The stick grew a few leaves, small, pale, cautious. By June, the tree looked almost exactly the way it had in March, except slightly less dead. No flowers, no visible growth beyond a handful of leaves. My neighbor leaned over the fence in July and asked, friendly enough, if I was sure it was still alive. Here's what nobody mentions about year 1. The tree is not failing. It is building roots.
As the light warms the earth,
Every bit of energy in that young trunk is going underground, reaching outward, establishing grip. The canopy will come later, the fruit much later. In year 1, the root system can double in spread, while the top barely changes. Think of it like a student who sits quietly in the back row for the first semester. No hand raised, no questions asked. Come December, you check the gradebook and realize they absorbed everything. The roots are doing the same work. What to do in year 1? 3 things. First, keep the mulch ring intact. 3 to 4 inches of wood chips in a circle around the trunk, pulled back a few inches from the bark itself. The mulch holds moisture, regulates soil temperature, and feeds the biology underneath. I refresh mine twice a year, once in spring, once in late autumn, and the layer compresses faster than most people expect. By midsummer, the original 4 inches is often down to 2. Second, watch for aphids. They love young growth. If you see curled leaves with tiny green or black clusters underneath, a strong spray of water from the hose knocks most of them off. No chemicals needed. The ladybugs will find the rest once they arrive, usually within a week or 2 of the first outbreak. I learned this the slow way. My first instinct was to buy a bottle of something at the hardware store. I did not need it. The garden had its own pest control. It simply needed time to mobilize. Third, prune only what is dead or broken. Nothing else. The temptation to shape the tree in year 1 is strong, but the tree needs every leaf it has right now to photosynthesize, to build the sugars that feed those roots. I kept my pruning shears in the shed that entire first year. Every time I walked past the tree and thought about trimming a wonky branch, I reminded myself, that branch is a solar panel. Leave it. What not to do? Fertilize heavily. I cannot stress this enough. I made this mistake with the plum tree. Dumped a generous scoop of granular fertilizer around the base in May, thinking I was being helpful. The tree pushed out a flush of soft, weak shoots that attracted every aphid in the county. I spent 3 weekends hand-spraying water at leaves while the tree tried to recover from my generosity. The plum taught me something I should have remembered from my classroom years. More input does not always produce more output. Sometimes it produces chaos. Year 2. The second spring, the apple tree woke up differently. I noticed it in early April, buds forming along the branches, tight and pale pink. 2 of them opened into blossoms. 2. I stood there with a cup of tea and stared at them like they were the first flowers on earth. The bees found them before I finished the cup. This is the part that stings. Both of those tiny fruits dropped off by June. One shriveled, the other just fell. I found it on the mulch, barely the size of a marble. I picked it up and held it in my palm and thought, is this tree producing anything, ever? It is. In year 2, the tree is testing its system. Flowers take energy, fruit takes more. A young tree often drops its first fruits because it does not yet have the root network or leaf canopy to sustain them. This is normal. This is not failure. This is the tree making a calculation about resources that is more precise than anything I could manage with a spreadsheet. Year 2 is when formative pruning starts to matter. The idea is simple. Choose 3 or 4 strong branches spaced around the trunk to become the main scaffold. Remove branches that cross through the center or grow straight up. The goal is an open vase shape that lets light and air reach the interior. I pruned mine on a cool morning in late February, before the buds broke. The cuts were small, nothing thicker than a pencil. I sealed nothing. The tree healed each wound on its own within 2 months. The sound of the shears through green wood is clean and quick, a soft snap, then silence. I made 7 cuts that morning and spent the rest of the hour picking up the trimmings and second-guessing every one. A word on watering in year 2, deep and infrequent. 1 long soak every 7 to 10 days in dry weather, enough to penetrate 8 inches down. The roots are deeper now, and shallow, frequent watering teaches them to stay near the surface, where they are vulnerable to heat. I measure by sticking a finger into the soil at drip line. If it is dry below the first knuckle, I water. If it is still cool and damp, I wait. Pests in year 2 tend to be different from year 1. Aphids may return, but now you might also see codling moth damage, or early signs of scab, dark spots on leaves. The simplest defense is hygiene. Pick up fallen leaves in autumn. Keep the area around the trunk clean, and thin out congested branches so air circulates. I lost a few leaves to scab on the plum that second year. I removed the spotted ones, raked everything in October, and the following spring it came back clean. A note on the emotional side of year 2, this is where most people give up. The tree looks like a tree now. It has branches, leaves, a shape. It occupies space. And it has produced nothing edible. 2 flowers, 0 fruit, 24 months of watering and mulching and watching. My neighbor asked again, this time less gently, whether I had considered replacing it with something faster. A raised bed of tomatoes, maybe. 60 days to harvest instead of 1,000. I thought about it, genuinely. There is a logic to wanting quick returns. I spent 30 years in a classroom. I understand the appeal of immediate feedback. A test on Friday, grades by Monday. A fruit tree does not work on that schedule. A fruit tree works on a schedule so slow that it forces a person to reconsider what waiting actually means. Not passive, not idle. I watered, I mulched, I pruned, I watched for pests. I did the work. The tree held up its end of the arrangement by building the structure that would eventually hold the weight of 22 apples. Year 3. The 3rd spring arrived, and the tree was unrecognizable from the stick I planted. The trunk had thickened. The bark had deepened from smooth pale green to rough gray-brown. I ran my hand along it one morning and felt the ridges under my fingers, like small channels carved by time. The scaffold branches I had chosen in year 2 had widened and stiffened. New growth was sprouting from every bud. In April, the blossoms came. Not 2, dozens. The whole canopy turned pale pink for about 10 days. The hum of bees was audible from the porch. I sat on the step one evening, with the last light coming through those blossoms, and thought about the woman at the nursery register. Give it 3 years. She knew. Not every blossom sets fruit. Maybe a third of them do on a young tree. The rest drop, petals on the mulch, small hard nubs that yellow and fall by late May. What remains grows slowly through June and July. By August, I could see the apples clearly, green turning to pale gold, some with a blush of red spreading from the sunny side. September, 22 apples, each one between 5 and 7 ounces. I weighed them on the kitchen scale because I wanted to remember the numbers. Total harvest from one tree in its third year, about 8 pounds. Not enough to feed a family through winter. Enough to make a pie, a few jars of sauce, and a bowl on the kitchen table that lasted a week. Enough to change how I think about time. I bit into the first one standing under the tree. It was tart, firm, with a sweetness that arrived late, after the crunch, after the juice ran down my wrist. Store apples do not taste like this. I am not romanticizing. There is a measurable difference between fruit picked right from a tree and fruit picked early, shipped cold, and displayed under fluorescent light. The texture alone tells the story. Here's how to tell if a tree is healthy by year 3. Strong central leader or open vase shape. Bark free of cracks or oozing sap. Leaves green without persistent spots, and new growth of 8 to 12 inches on the tips of main branches each season. If the tree is meeting those markers, it is on track, whether it produces 10 fruits or 25. Now, which trees to plant if this is where the idea starts for you? 4 that forgive beginners and deliver within a reasonable timeline. Apple trees, the most patient of the 4, but also the most reliable. Semi-dwarf varieties fruit in 2 to 4 years from planting. They tolerate a range of soils, handle moderate neglect, and most varieties in zones 4 through 8 will produce without drama. One thing to know, most apples need a second variety nearby for cross-pollination. 2 trees, 15 to 20 feet apart. Cost per semi-dwarf bare root from a nursery, $15 to $25. Plum trees. European plums are self-fertile, meaning one tree is enough. They tend to produce a year earlier than apples, sometimes light fruit by the second summer. Plums are forgiving about pruning mistakes and tolerant of heavy soil. The trade-off: they are more attractive to wasps and brown rot in humid climates. A spray of diluted neem in early spring helps. Cost: similar to apple, $15 to $20 bare root. Cherry trees. Sour cherries, the kind for pies and preserves, are the fastest to produce. Some bear fruit in the second year. They are self-fertile, compact, and handle partial shade better than most fruit trees. Sweet cherries are slower and need a pollination partner. For beginners, I suggest sour. The fruit is not what most people imagine when they think cherry, but baked into a pie it becomes something else entirely. Cost: $12 to $20 bare root. Pear trees. Slower than the others, often 4 years to first fruit. The advantage is longevity. A pear tree can produce for 50 years or more, and once established, it requires almost no attention. Pears also have fewer pest problems than apples. The downside is patience. 4 years is a long wait, and the harvesting window is tricky. Pears ripen off the tree, not on it. Pick them firm, let them sit indoors for a week. Cost: $15 to $25. Between those 4, a beginner can spend $60 to $80 and have a small orchard that will be producing fruit within 3 to 4 years. The key is choosing varieties rated for the local hardiness zone and buying bare root in late winter when nurseries stock fresh trees. There is one more thing nobody tells beginners about fruit trees, and it is not about soil or pruning or pests. It is about the quality of waiting. In my teaching years, I graded thousands of final exams. The answer was always at the end of the booklet. The student either learned the material or did not, and the evidence was on the page within the hour. Fruit trees do not hand in exams, they hand in seasons. Each year is one page, and it takes 3 or 4 pages before anything resembling a conclusion shows up. The temptation to flip ahead, to rush the process, to add more fertilizer or switch to a faster crop. I felt all of it. What I learned instead is that the waiting is not empty. Every month of year 1, when the tree was doing invisible work underground, was building the foundation for year 3. Every dropped blossom in year 2 was the tree editing itself, deciding what it could sustain and what it could not. The 22 apples in year 3 did not appear from nowhere. They were the result of 36 months of quiet, deliberate accumulation. Roots, then structure, then fruit. I have a second tree now, a pear, planted last autumn. It looks exactly the way the apple did, a stick with a few tentative buds. My neighbor saw me planting it and walked over. He said, "Another one." I said, "Another one." He paused, looked at the apple tree with its 22 red fruits, and said nothing more. A tree does not grow on a schedule you set. It grows on a schedule it discovers, one season at a time, adjusting for wind and rain and cold and the particular patch of ground it landed in. All it asks is that someone keeps showing up. Tomorrow, a project with a faster return. 3 hours of work, $28 in materials, and fresh salad in November. A cold frame built from scraps.